I am Jim Collison, live from the Gallup studios here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup's Theme Thursday, Season 4, recorded on June 7th, 2018. Theme Thursday is a Gallup webcast series that dives deep into the CliftonStrengths themes, one theme at a time, and today's theme is context. If you have questions, comments, or contributions during this webcast, we do have a live chat room. It's available for you right now, right below the main video window down there. Just choose bottom left-hand corner, log in, choose the guest account, and put your name in where it says guest. Take those numbers out of there, hit submit. You'll be in our chat room. We'll be monitoring that during the program, especially important for the post show. And don't miss the post show if you're coming out live. And if you've never joined us live, you should. Post show is where all the really great stuff happens, but you got to come out and join us live when we do this. If you're listening to the recorded version or have questions about custom strengths coaching solutions, you can send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. Don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center, just gallupstrengthscenter.com for all your Clifton Strengths coaching resources and training needs to catch this video, and also downloadable audio. We call that podcasting. It's available for you on our resources page. Head out to the coaches blog, coaching.gallup.com, and click on resources. Scroll down a little bit. You'll see the podcasts down there. Micah Libran is our host today. Micah works as a workplace consultant with us here at Gallup. Micah, you're in a remote location today. Can we even disclose where you're at?
I'm in Imperial, Nebraska, in what used to be my niece's bedroom. So shout out to Nora for the purple ribbon on the wall.
Nice. Wow. Your family matters out in Nebraska. Right?
I grew up here, as did my husband, and we lost a grandfather this week, and he was just an awesome. In fact, I've thought about context a lot. Just a super awesome guy with a huge legacy in this wonderful small town. So we're working remotely this week.
I'm excited about context. It's low for both of us, and I think sometimes we both learn a lot when for us when we have to go through this together. But let's dig in a little bit. Give us kind of the rundown on context.
So context is a strategic thinking theme. It's all about comprehending the present by knowing the past. Planning where you're going by knowing where you have been. People high in context, when you read the long definition, it talks a lot about loving history or making sense of things through history. But I think the real value of context is being able to not miss things that have been relevant and important in the past, especially as you're thinking about how to move through the present and into the future.
So when we think about context for folks that have it high, if you're in the chat room, I know we did this a little bit early, but let us know where it is for you. What are things that we're at our best at? How do we do our best with it?
So if you've got high context, I think the value that you bring is you can create safety by ensuring that mistakes are not repeated. You can promote inclusivity isn't this cool? Think about using context to promote inclusivity by understanding individual and group histories. I mean, that idea of understanding, gosh, this is where we came from, and these are the people who contributed to that story, and here's what we appreciate about it. I think it adds roots in a lot of ways to your current situation. I think that folks with high context can, when it's at its best, they're well informed. They're prepared for everything because there's nothing new. It's sort of understanding that, hey, things might seem urgent, things might seem different than they've ever been. Oftentimes I think people find comfort in describing situations as brand new. But I think if you've got high context, you probably know that there's at least some element of what we're doing that we can learn from either ourselves in the past or other people who've gone before us. It's also the values about calmly being able to reference what you know, so existing knowledge, when you're faced with a problem that might seem like it's something we've never grappled with before. And especially, I mean, Jim, you work with young kids, with technology, with probably the most fastly changing, we're going to say that, the most rapidly changing industry in the world, specific with technology. Imagine the value of context, being able to say, maybe with a little creativity, that what we're facing right now has lines that we can draw to where we've been.
I think context for me may be a theme that while it's middle, I actually try to pull up just as much as I can, because you mentioned, with the interns. When you're working with students, it's oftentimes helpful to say, we're here today because this is where we used to be. And this was the path that we took to get there. And, we've been doing this thing kind of, if we think about the PC and the modern technology era that we're in, really started in the mid 70s. There's a lot of things that happened before these students were even born, even alive, that I grew up with it. Most of it happened while I've been living, but for them, not so much. And so it's a great opportunity for me to use that, even though I don't use it all the time, but I use it a lot in that it's a storytelling. Hey, let me tell you why we're here.
Yeah.
Because I get a lot of questions. I do this in the community a lot too, Micah, where, hey, tell me why Gallup decided to do this, right? And have to kind of bring that context in. Okay, let's hear the whole story. Let's get the whole thing so that you can have some kind of understanding. So that's how I use it. How can others use it? What's the best way for them? Things they can do to be successful with context.
This is great, Jim. You do have my notes, but I don't think you meant to make this beautiful segue. But
Oh,
that's a great example. Gosh, what should you be raising your hand for? The opportunity to help people understand what they're currently a part of. Whether it's, think about, Jim, what you do with our coaches community, but how do you help folks, I guess, understand who came before them, what stories came before them, what artifacts, what folklore is important to where we've been. My dad has high context, and he's probably a pretty textbook definition of context, and then he just loves the History Channel. But if you can think about really productively aiming, that means that you're not just sorting chaos into timeline for your own benefit, but you're thinking about orienting and providing some a bigger, I don't want to try and not use the word context, but what we're really trying to do is set the scene for folks for where we are. Context is part of what I imagine Kurt probably calls a time package. It's looking backwards, whereas futuristic is looking forwards, and connectedness in a lot of ways is just looking in all directions. I think adaptability can also do that, of sort of here we are in the present. All of those themes, I think, have a similar ability to set the stage for people, to help them zoom out and say, let me just paint you a picture of where we are. What context does is say, let me paint you a picture of where we are based on what we've been doing. Now, that could mean in an organization that you're helping people understand we're going through change and we've tried these 4 different things to address the change that we're going through. Or it could mean something a little bit more specific and history focused, of like, hey, here's what we're excited about today because here's what our ancestors did. Or I think it's important. I'm currently calling you from one of my favorite places in the world that exists because of a land grant act of 1968, and knowing that helps me navigate my world. Now, I don't have high context. That came from people who probably did have high context. And so being the benefactor of people who can use history, either personal history or community history or more nation geographic history, I've gotten the benefit of that by understanding what sort of orienting it does for me, what sort of it allows me to think a little bit more clearly about where we're going, because I've been able to borrow that information about why we are where we are right now.
yeah, and in your notes, you say avoid past mistakes, understand original intent. Well, that's not always, history repeats itself. That doesn't always mean we have to stay stuck in it either. But context brings that amazing ability to say, hey, this is where we've been, and chances are these things could happen again. Then what are we going to do next? And so it doesn't always, I think sometimes the backside of this is people think that it forces us to repeat the mistakes of the past. And no, it's actually the opposite of that, which is saying, hey, this is what we've done in the past, and we can use this information to help us make better decisions moving forward. Doesn't mean it's always going to be the same decision, right?
And Jim, what you're describing there, I think, is really the mature benefit of context, because let's be honest, there is that temptation to just look toward the past and want to be there. And I think especially with context, you want to look toward the past and be there, and it's more clear to you what there looks like. Your understanding of the past is so much more, I think, real than it is to other people. I've probably talked about this in a previous season, but a college roommate of mine had context really high, and she could understand timelines better than anyone I've ever met in my life. To me, I think there's a line from The Lion King where a monkey hits somebody on the head and says, "What was that?" Well, it doesn't matter. It's in the past. My idea of the past is somewhere else. So when I look backwards, it's a little bit more with imagination. I think there is a danger for people with high context to be able to look backwards and very accurately pinpoint reasons they'd prefer to be there than where they are today. And so the challenge is, how do you use that? And instead of being resistant to change, how do you use that to help people understand what kinds of pieces we need to be careful about?
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think we got some good opportunities, and when we're putting ourselves in certain situations, what could we ask for? What things could we do that would help bring this out?
I think ask for the history, even if other people don't think there is a history. So ask questions like, hey, what started this conversation? Who were our early adopters? Who have our stakeholders been? Who are they now? What is this organization or this university or this community known for doing well in the past? Sort of a strengths based understanding on history. How has our metrics for success changed over time? What was our most important failure? What was our most important success? You can hear from all of those questions that they're all looking backwards, but they're doing it in a very supportive way that gets some excitement about the future.
Yeah, metrics are a great support for someone with context. And if you're not, sometimes I wonder if you're not tied into some kind of metrics engine, whether it be stats or whether it be sales figures or whether it be attendance numbers. For Micah, for you and I, our blog numbers, we look at those to get context of where we've been. What are we doing? How is it affecting people? That's a look backwards for us. And then that always points us back towards the future. What else could we be doing, either differently or the same, to get those same kinds of results? So I love that idea of being tied context. We sometimes think of it in terms of history, but I also like tying it to historical data
Yeah.
and saying what not just what has happened to us, but having the metrics to measure what happened to us and then make decisions.
Well, and that idea of maybe even just the qualitative data as well is what did we think was successful in the past? What did we think was a failure in the past? How did we react to what happened in the past?
Yeah.
It's sort of that idea of, hey, how do you dive further into a theme that you have? Look for other ways to read history.
No, right on. I think what could we, speaking of that, I mean, what's when we think of other ways, what are some things we can worry about less?
Worry less about being creative on your own. If you have high context, you're going to need to build on something. So ask for it, or have ways to find it quickly. Maybe you've got favorite search engines, or you've got favorite data to go to, or you've got maybe just like wise old owls in the trees. So you might have sage advisors who were part of something, or who you turn into sort of a mentoring relationship. Have people you can go to who can help inform you about where we've been.
Micah, when we're working with context, what can we expect? What kind of things should we be looking for people who have it?
I think expect that they're going to need a little bit of opportunity to do their homework. It doesn't need to be a burden. It can be a safety net, because once they've done a little bit of history gazing, they can really sort of let go and run free. But that's going to lead to expecting curiosity. You can expect some curiosity from these folks about where we've been before, not just what we're doing today. If you don't know to expect that and you don't have context, that could appear like somebody's trying to slow down the process. It could appear like somebody's resistant to what you're offering. But really, it is just folks with high context showing that they care about the conversation. Expect brainstorming that looks backwards, not just, hey, what if we do this, but maybe, hey, when we did this. It doesn't sound like brainstorming to people like me who have high ideation. It sounds like you're shutting me down. You're not. You're engaging somebody with context to be able to say not just what could be brand new, but what do we know about what we've learned before?
You mentioned slowing things down a little bit to see these stories or whatever this data. How's that different than deliberative? If we think of context and deliberative together, how are those different?
It depends on how that context is being used. It could look very similar. Deliberative is an executing theme that's about how the plan going forward. So deliberative is looking for risk, looking for potential landmines, and maybe slowing things down a little bit to find the very best, most accurate path forward that's going to avoid all possible risk that you can possibly predict. Context, I think, can do that by saying, I know that there have been some missteps that we've made in the past, and therefore when we move forward, I want to make sure to avoid X, Y, Z. But context isn't necessarily committed. Context isn't looking for risk. Context isn't looking even for a plan. What it's looking for is understanding. And what it's looking for is understanding that is somehow similar to analytical, where analytical is looking for proof and truth and evidence. Context is looking for historical understanding, stories, on maybe even data points, but looking for things that have existed previously in order to make sense of where we are.
Yeah. No, and I love the quality component actually of that, where it's not telling stories just to tell stories, right? There is an element of telling stories, I think, that is like, this is just it has a cute ending, or it has a surprise at the end. it's telling stories for the reason of doing the right things. Like,
Yeah.
hey, we're doing this. In the past, this happened. And so I think there's a differentiator. Being a good storyteller is not necessarily, I mean, I guess it's why are you telling the story, or why are you bringing up the data, right?
I think people with high context aren't just good storytellers, they're good story listeners.
Mm. Wow. That's actually, that is pretty profound. Yeah. I like it. Give me a few more sentences around that,
You didn't
Michael.
want me to just mic drop on that and hope
Yeah,
people
no,
got it?
I want some more. I don't do that enough. So tell me a little bit more. What do you think?
Context, people with high context might tell stories, but it's not because they want to entertain. It's not because they want to engage with other people. It's because the realness, the reality, the truth of understanding life and plans and future comes from stories that have already happened. Those stories might be, they're probably not, I think there's not a lot of fiction, right? You're not just looking for what's the folklore in the past. You're looking for what's the events, what have been the pieces, what have been the plans that have unfolded in the past, what's actually happened. And so I think in a lot of ways, people with high context go about their life with a different set of ears. You know, they're listening for maybe even today, what's going to resonate from today into the future. It's probably a stretch for context, but I think it could happen. That idea of the reason I say story listeners, because there is this element of a narrative or a storyline to context, and it's a timeline. It's understanding how events stack on top of each other and interact with each other.
Yeah, almost not the what, but the why, of the story.
And the when, and a lot of the sort of this happened and then that happened. And I think in that case, you can start to see how it crosses a lot of the lines of through the other strategic thinking themes of, if I can understand this timeline, if I can understand the context of it, then I can also understand the other mitigating circumstances or the other sort of ripple effect that context may have had on other that context has where it crosses over and sounds like some other pieces.
Yeah, your story listener is resonating well with the chat room out there, and it's just got its own hashtag. So very, very cool. When we think about context in the term of recognition, how do we recognize those with context?
Recognize the roots that they provide for thought. When they can get their understanding of history, whether it's personal history, strategic history, geographic, or even just history of the group, in a place that other people can digest, it creates a solid understanding that I think opens up people's minds for creativity. We talked about this a little bit in some other themes of what you can do to create some solid ground so that other people can really take off. Context, whether you're talking about managing yourself or contributing to a group, I think creates a lot of great roots that allow things to happen that wouldn't otherwise be credible, that wouldn't otherwise be relevant, or that wouldn't otherwise be further than where we are. Without somebody with context on your team, you could go have a really great brainstorm, or you could come up with a great new product and not realize it's already been made 12 times, right? And so I think it provides relevance to the group. So recognize that. Also recognize in a context way. So recognize not just where we are, but the journey that they took from where they started. So what better way to recognize context than maybe even to look at their own history? And I'm not saying that as waiting to recognize somebody until they retire. That's probably the worst thing that we do in our society today, is throw gigantic retirement parties where we are surprised by what's being said. When you do recognize somebody, look at not just where they are, but where they've come from.
You're also at a funeral this week, and I think sometimes we wait too long to honor those in our lives that need to hear it. They can't hear it at the funeral. Right. You need to, this is another exercise in context, I think, is people tell them how significant they are to you historically while they're still alive to hear it. Right.
Yeah.
And just use that opportunity. I've often thought about, with my birthday last month, it's a significant milestone. And I wanted the birthday to be about how I appreciated, the family that's around me, and let's not wait till let's not wait for a funeral to say those things. Let's say them while we still can. So great ways to, I think, and maybe Mike, as we think about how do we stretch it, I think that may be an area where we take the recognition and stretch it into telling people the value based on some historical content or whatever in real time, like while they're still with us. Mm-hmm. How do we stretch people? How do we stretch context?
Let's say you're a manager of somebody with high context, you want to help them get better, or you're a good partner of somebody with high context. Give them a chance to practice sharing what they know in a way that gets into other people's heads. It's a strategic thinking theme. It's not an influencing theme. It's not about having an audience, but it can benefit when it has one. So ask them, what's the best way for you to communicate? Do you need short bullet points, or do you need to string multiple history lessons together on one sort of common thread? Do you best communicate out loud with a partner, using a PowerPoint, telling a story, knowing a joke? I think studying your success, maybe even studying your failure, but looking for that common thread of when have you helped other people see what you see, is a really great, important thing to study. Also, give them information, and then help them sort. So instead of thinking that you have to decide how they're best going to absorb information and then filter it prior to offering it, for many of the strategic thinking themes, but I'm specifically going to dive into context, instead of trying to pre-sort, give them everything you know and tell them that's what you're doing. So you're guiding them through it. Say, hey, I'm going to tell you all of the details that I have around this problem. You feel free to help navigate me to what's making most sense with you. Right. So it's basically saying, here's the whole library, here's the whole history, but then help them say, okay, what points are standing out to you? And that's an opportunity to study things that are probably going to be partially determined based on your theme dynamics. So you might have other relationship building themes, and the personal histories are standing out most. You might have other strategic thinking themes, and some of the more data rich points are standing out more. But helping them understand what is relevant to their own brain, and how does that relevance lead to performance? That's really your goal in helping through that exercise of basically just give them everything and then help them sort to what's standing out.
I like that idea of context partnering with input.
Yeah.
Right. Input has been collecting this, and context can help make sense of it. Where else can we partner? How can we, for those that are high in context, how can we partner with them?
Share some relevant personal history. Start from a place not just of, hi, it's nice to meet you, here's what I do. But even if you've been working with these partners for a while, think about your own bullet points. What is it important that this person's going to know you better if they can know some of your history? So be willing to offer it up. Ask what they know about a current challenge, and then sort of get out of the way and absorb it and listen. Tell them what pieces of history most help you move forward. So it's sort of educating people on how they can use their superpowers best to individualize, and helping them understand, I don't need you to tell me the whole 40-hour season of what you saw on the History Channel. These are the pieces that I find most relevant to my own performance. Or anytime I face a challenge, when you bring up XYZ, that really helps me move off center, that helps me execute, or that helps me connect with other people. So it's similar to what I suggested doing for the folks with high context, which is help them sort through their best way to look at for historical information. If you're a partner of somebody with context, help them know what kind of history helps you the most, because it's just a way of saying, I know you've got something great, and here's how we can make it better. Or, hey, I know you want to help me, and here's the best way you're going to help me. There's no better educator of how to treat yourself than you. So partner by offering that up and letting people know.
Micah, this is the part of the program where we look for people to actually do things. Yeah, we are expecting you to do stuff. We have some challenges. First, tell them how they connect with us on these challenges, and then let's give them to them.
So these are going to be located for you on our Instagram, which is my personal Instagram. It's @StrengthsTalk on Instagram. I'll load those for you. They're also, if somebody wants to migrate these over and post them in our Call to Coach Facebook group, it's called Gallup Webcasts, facebook.com/group/call to coach. You can also find them once this video has posted, and if you're watching it in a recorded manner, it's already posted. It's probably right below the screen, but they're posted in our show notes as well. But most important and most current way to connect with your community here is to follow us on Instagram @StrengthsTalk. So the first of the challenges speaks to somebody who has high context. That's the theme challenge. If you don't have high context, or if it's a lesser theme for you, we've got a lesser theme challenge. So the context challenge is as follows. Number one, there's two. Number one, I love this word, find a local totem. So define the community that you're going to do this for. Maybe it's your family, maybe it's your neighborhood, maybe it's your workplace or your team. And then look for an object, a story, or even a hashtag that has shown great importance in that community. Look for something that, an artifact really of sorts that has helped define the folklore of that community. Number 2, interview someone who's been working on your team for the longest about what daily life was like for them when they started. A little, and it's fun to look at that. I'm reminded of I actually got to see my 6th grade history teacher at a funeral yesterday. And I get to see my grandpa today. And I'm reminded that in 6th grade, when we were studying World War II, our assignment was to interview a veteran. And I went out with my cassette recorder to Grandma and Grandpa's house and interviewed Grandpa Irvin about what his experience was in the war. And so, it for me, I'm a storyteller. I'm not, which means I'm also a story listener, #story listener. But I don't tend to always go to history for stories. And it taught me that there is so much more than my own imagination when it comes to connecting with and understanding people through stories. Yeah. So challenge number 2 is a slightly minimized version of that. You don't have to go all the way back 70 years. I just want you to interview the person who's been on your team the longest and ask them, where they've been.
And you are a good story listener, by the way. I never would have used that term, but now that we are, you're really good at that. I spend, well, the best part of my job is 30 minutes before this program, I get to hang out with you as we kind of prep, and you're always probing me for those stories. Tell me about your week. Tell me how this happened. You said something, like I'll have said something in an email or in passing, and you'll say, tell me about that. And that's, I think you're looking for that context in me, trying to pull that out. So you're a good story listener. All right, lesser theme challenge. What do we do if we don't have it high? What are we going to do this week?
If you don't have it high, number 1, storyboard your personal history. So if someone with context was new to your team, what bullet points would you want them to know about you? I think it's a great gift to give people with context, is to give them a little history. I mean, if you're listening to this and you're working with students, imagine what a new student needs when they show up to your school. They need to know the history of where the school's been or why they chose this campus. If you're working with onboarding a new member in a workplace setting, they're going to need to trust you by knowing your story. So lesser challenge number 2, storyboard your personal history. Number 2, I want you to just answer a question. You can answer this through themes or through practice or through skill or knowledge. It doesn't matter. You answer this however you want. But the question is, what gives you confidence in your decisions? Somebody with high context is going to find confidence through history. I want you, if you don't have context, to just determine what gives you confidence in your decisions.
Oh, very good. So those challenges are available for you. Again, I'll post them out on our Facebook group. Head out to the Instagram account @StrengthsTalk. Love to interact with you, those around context. Micah, one of my favorite things to do is to listen to people who are gifted storytellers, but who have high context. And one day I got to sit and drink wine with Vint Cerf. So Vint is the inventor of the internet, like one of the guys on the initial team that put the internet in place at UCLA back in the 70s. And Vint is just really good at telling stories that have this high context. And I don't know if it's in his top 5. I'd have that somewhere. I think I took a picture of his nameplate here at Gallup when we had it in the DC office. But for me, it's been really, really important or really, really helpful to take, when I don't have it, when I can't see that context, to be able to use it in others to say, oh, give me some more of that history there of why. Because I want to know the why. I don't want to repeat the problems that we've had in the past. Although I always think it's good to look ahead and to say, just because it happened that way doesn't mean the future is going to be that way. And that we write the future, right? We write what happens, and just because of the way it happened in the past. So, Mike, anything else you want to add as we think about wrapping up context here?
I think context, to me, it's so different than so many of the other, even the strategic thinking themes, and that it does provide the specific value of not missing things that have happened before. And just what a beautiful gift that gives. I think like you said, everything we do today is building on the legacy that we're going to leave. But without folks with high context, we're going to miss really what that has meant for the people who came before us. Yeah. And I'm in a pretty cool spot this week where I get to celebrate big histories of a really wonderful person who, in many ways, created this town that I'm sitting in right now. And so I think it's pretty cool theme to help us remember that we're not alone in wanting to make this world a better place, and that we're not the first people who want to do great work. And it's such a great gift to share what we know about that context with people we care about.
Years ago, I went into a church, an old church here in Omaha, and brought contemporary music to what had been a very traditional church.
Ooh.
And yeah, I was young, and what you just said, about like we're not the inventor of new ideas. Like, every generation has wanted to make a big difference. And I remember going in, I was taught a very important lesson by someone who gave me some context of why things the way where they, I was kind of saying we need to go this direction, and then I got some context. And it was really, really important to then back up and think and say, okay, what do I do with this context? And for those in leadership roles or you're listening to this, I think it's really, really important to take that context into consideration as people are giving it to you. They're not just, especially if they're high in context, they're not doing it because it's fun. They're doing it because they have to. Like they're seeing danger or they're seeing something, and they have to say or they have to give that input. And so listen, I think if, have that, make sure you're taking it into account. So Micah, thanks for doing it again with me. Sorry again for my voice today. For your context, little allergies. So that's just.
I think it sounds fine. Thanks for sticking it out, Jim.
A little gravelly. We'll remind everyone to take full advantages of all the resources we have available at the Gallup Strength Center. Just GallupStrengthsCenter.com. Send us your questions or comments. If you'd like to be a guest blogger, we take those as well. And you can send us a kind of your formed blog. We're looking for 400 to 600 words around strengths is kind of what we're looking for. I actually love some stories. I don't know, Mike, if we get enough really good stories.
We don't. I think when we talk about write us a blog, people think they have to have like something about the philosophy or the right or wrong way to do things. Awesome blogs are also just, hey, here's how I coached somebody, what they were facing, what we did, and what improved. So tell some good stories too.
Yeah, no, we'd love to hear that. Send us in an email, coaching@gallup.com, put guest blogger in the subject line, and then we'll get those routed over to Micah and we'll see what we can do with it. Don't forget, we have a pretty extensive resources page on our coaches blog as well, coaching.gallup.com. You guys, by the way, last summer, just for some context, last summer we did a contest and we had some interns fix that resources page. We're now looking at the topics page. So if you've been out to the coaches blog, clicked on topics, it's a bunch of really super boring, just links. They're just links. They're ugly. They're boring. We want to know how to fix them, how to make them better. And we're taking your suggestions. Put that out on the Called to Coach Facebook page. Go to facebook.com/groups/called-to-coach. And we'll love to have you join us and give me some input, give the intern some input. It was interesting, Micah, yesterday as I asked them about it, they were like, hey, where could we get some more information about the people that we're actually helping this with? And I said, oh, well, I know them pretty well. Let's put it out on Facebook and we'll see what we get. So jump out there and let me know over the next couple of weeks. We'll we got some mock-ups coming next week and we'll share those with you on the site. You can vote on them as well. Love to have you help us with that. If you're interested in becoming a Gallup certified strengths coach, you can see a list of all of our courses, including those available at the summit, CliftonStrengthsSummit.com, coming up here in a couple weeks. They're on those are all out there, courses.gallup.com. Just don't forget, still not too late, Micah, we just crossed over 1,100 coming to the summit. It's going to be a big deal. 15% discount. You and I are going to be there. Hopefully my voice will be a little bit better by the time we get there. Don't forget, we do this just about every Thursday. We'd love to see us live in the chat room. And for our new badges, apparently, that are coming, we'll talk about that in the post show.
Next week, I'm going to have a cool idea of I don't know, jars of gold that should just appear.
Themed Thursday badges, I think, are coming for those coming to the summit of some kind. We'll see you next week. With that, we'll say goodbye, everybody.